a little bit farther back. I think we're going to take masks off just so you can kind of clearly hear us. If we come into the audience at all, we'll put them back on just so that we're adhering to that. Welcome. Do you want to introduce yourself first?
Well, first, thank you all for coming. I think I know most faces. It's so hard when everyone's wearing masks, trying to decipher who everyone is. But my name is Erika Mullins. I am the kindergarten teacher here at St. George's, and prior to that, I taught 5th grade for 13 years with Jennifer Davenport, the kids' art teacher. So for a lot of people, that's new information when I say that, but we taught together. And prior to that, I taught 5th grade down in a public school in California. So most of my educational career has been here at St. George's. And then I also have officially two teenagers living in my house with me, 2 daughters, 8th grader and a 7th grader. And social emotional learning has always been something that's been an important part of my classroom, an important part of what I do with kids, and a huge part of what I do as a parent with my own children. So I am also currently picking up my administrative certificate at Eastern Washington University. So this was just a good opportunity for me to work on some coursework and also spend time with Megan, really working on something that I'm very passionate about as a teacher and a parent. So I hope you enjoy what we have today, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Erika. I was super excited when she approached me to like, hey, could we potentially work together on something social emotional related? I was like, yes, let's absolutely do that. It was kind of at the same time that I was having conversations with Jamie about how we could kind of start to provide opportunities through the Center for Family Engagement that we have here. I'm Meghan Kilgore, so I skipped that part. K-12 counselor and director for Center for Family Engagement here at St. George's. I've been here this is my 4th year. Before this, I was in private practice doing family and child therapy. It was great and I loved it, but I was really eager to be in a school setting. So really glad I get to be here. Really love what I get to do specifically in the lower school as well. So we're excited to share a little bit about that with you all this morning. We're going to do a few things. We're going to talk about a little bit of what social emotional learning is, why we do it here, what the benefits are. I'm going to go over briefly what specifically our curriculum looks like in the lower school for social emotional learning. And then we're going to share with you some tools, some strategies, some that we do here that we hope that maybe you could use at home. And then we're going to practice a little bit and do a little bit of group work. So we're going to get through all of that. I just want to say thank you to Erika because she's the one that kind of, again, approached me with this and said like, hey, let's put on something for this. I'm really excited that we get together and connect this morning, share some insight. We do have some things that we will be presenting material-wise, but please feel free at any time, raise your hand, ask questions, share input, insight. We love talking about this stuff, but it is more helpful when it's kind of that discussion type vibe. So please feel free to interject at any time. We are recording this. Hopefully it's picking up on the volume, but at any point you can go back and then watch that. You can also feel free to take notes on the handouts that are on that front table if you need one. And or jot down if you have specific questions about your student that you want to follow up with one of us later, feel free to do that throughout as well. Okay, with that, we will move to our next slide maybe, except my computer's kind of lost with stuff. Okay. Yeah, little things. All right.
Okay. So the first question is, when in education or in other fields, you just say, oh, SEL, and you say it like everyone knows what you're talking about. So the first thing we wanted to talk about is what is SEL? It's an acronym for social emotional learning. And in my research on looking at this, as adults, we look at it like, oh, these are all things people should know. How to get along with others, how to regulate emotions. And we often think that it's just intuitive stuff that kids will just pick up, but in reality, it's stuff we should be teaching kids. It should be instruction on how to do those things. So we want to help them manage their emotions, create positive goals, have empathy for others, and maintain relationships, and also have the ability to make responsible choices. Those are things that we are working on at school, in the classroom, every day in the classroom. We are so fortunate that we have Megan and that we get that SEL time once a week with her, but it is also something that every classroom teacher does every day on a regular basis. When I switched from 5th grade to kindergarten, my greatest aha was how much time in kindergarten I spend on this. In fifth grade, I felt like I spent most of my day on academics. And if there was an issue or a problem, then we'd touch on the SEL. But so I went into kindergarten thinking that, that job was the same, that most of my day was going to be spent teaching these beautiful young children academics. And then it took me about 2 months to realize that I was greatly mistaken, and that most of my day is teaching these children how to interact with each other, how to make good choices. When we're upset, what do we do? When we're not happy about something, what do we do? How do we respond to these different events? So the last 8, we were counting how many years I've been in kindergarten. So the last 8 years, I've seen just the great importance of, for all children, really incorporating that into what we do. And so the research is very clear that the benefits of SEL go far beyond the classroom. It helps them outside of the classroom. It helps them at home. They have a greater self-awareness and positive behaviors. And at the end of the day, what we want for our students and what you want for your children is to be able to interact with other people in an appropriate and positive manner. And when problems arise, that they have the tools to help solve those problems. So those are kind of what we want out of our SEL programming. Do you want to add anything?
I'll kind of get into it as I talk about what I do with our program. Are you ready for that? Okay, wonderful. So lots and lots of text on this slide. We'll kind of get to that. I had this wonderful, wonderful opportunity when I was hired. We didn't have anything set up in the lower school specifically for like, what does social and emotional learning look like down here? So I had complete freedom and flexibility of creating a program and developing a curriculum, which was super, super cool for me. It's something I'm really passionate. I hope you will take away from this this hour that I'm talking to you about it, that like this stuff really matters to me, and I think it's really important to teach our students. Kind of some of those things that Erika was mentioning, those interpersonal skills, connecting with one another, figuring out how to advocate for themselves, how to talk about what they're experiencing, what they're feeling, and why that matters. This is like an extensive list of the themes that we kind of cover K through 5. And we're going to go through a few of these. I want to talk a little bit about like some of the goals that I have in our social and emotional learning programming in the lower school. So Erika mentioned it. I get to meet with them once a week. That was something that I kind of asked Kathy as we were looking at what can this look like. And we wanted to kind of model it a little bit off of like our specialist schedule. Like this is just something that we get to incorporate in the day. Our teachers are doing it on a consistent basis throughout the day, but having some intentional time set aside to talk about social emotional learning. What is it? What does it look like? What does it feel like? How does it show up? And how do we do it, basically? So I get to be in the classrooms for 30 minutes each week, and I've got kind of an overview of like, this is what we're doing this month, or these are some themes that we want to make sure we cover in the 2nd grade this year. But what's really neat about it is that I get to kind of adapt it to whatever the needs are of the specific class or the group of students or the year that it looks like. Obviously with COVID, we had to adapt quite a bit, right? But we have these overarching goals of like, okay, let's teach these kids how to talk about this stuff, give them the language, teach them coping skills of what do I do when I'm feeling a certain way. The interpersonal skills that we see as being like a really, really important thing. I was actually talking with our upper school head, and when they were doing college application, they talked about how that's actually what they're looking for these days. Not realistically, I mean, yes, 4.0 is a great GPA to have, but looking at like, do you know how to talk to people? Do you know how to communicate? Do you have a good understanding of who you are and what you can do with the strengths that you have? Can you identify your areas for growth, and what are you doing to work on those things? So really starting that at an early age, because we've shown like it can be a really beneficial thing. And like I said, I just really love doing it. So it's cool that we can have both of those things happen. We're going to do a little poll. I would love for you to kind of take a look at this list if you can see it, or you've got it hopefully in front of you. And I'm going to switch the screen, so bear with me, patience on this little technology part of this. But I'd love for you to take a look and think about which one of these on this list do you see as already being a strength of your kiddo. If you can pull out your phones, if you have it, that's how we're going to share your options. I'm going to quickly get out of here, come over here and activate this. So which one do you feel like is a strength? What you will do, you can either text this number, I'm using Brad Kirsch, one of our middle school teachers, his account, so it was easier that way. You can text this 37607, and then you text Brad, B-R-A-D, Kirsch, K-I-R-S-C-H, 795. You can also go to this website, and then all you do after you text that number, and I can repeat it again if you need, I know it's a little far away, then you just send a text with the list. So once everybody's kind of activated, logged into this, I can go back to that slide that has our options. But again, thinking about what is the strength that your kiddo you already see in them, something that maybe we want to teach, we want to help them develop, but that you're already seeing. If you've got questions about this, please feel free to ask too.
I have kids too, so I'm playing. I'm excited.
Anyone still? Yeah, we're
still working on it.
Yeah, no rush. I will say, as we do this, and as we're getting here, I will also share a little bit. Glasses are hard. Starting to show.
You still got a little time.
Okay.
Shall we get in? Oh, wonderful. I think we will have to switch them. Yeah, we have. Yeah. Yeah, so then you can just text the answer right to it. It'll say you've joined this poll.
I was looking for the poll that we were.
Nope, then you can just text right to it.
Okay.
We'll wait for these to come in. One of the cool things that is part of our programming is that while I'm in the classroom teaching, what realistically is happening also is that I get to really get to know your kids and develop relationships with them, which is realistically one of the most important roles of the counselor. And then they know me so that if or when stuff comes up, they can feel comfortable coming to talk to me. Again, this also happens with their teachers, and I always encourage hey, your teacher is a great resource to talk about any kind of problem solving skills as well. But it's a really helpful thing when stuff comes up for them to already have a familiar face, a trusted adult where they can say, yeah, okay, I know Meghan cares about this stuff. She's a safe person to talk to. So it's really cool to have that. Wonderful. We got some. So once you've texted this, then you should be able to send another message saying, this is what my kiddo is right.
Well, and as a teacher, I'm just going to say that when Meghan is on the schedule, when her name is up on our daily schedule, they're so excited. They love when she comes in. They love getting to know her, getting to know each other, and then working on the skills. But more than the skills, it's the relationships that they're building with each other and with Meghan that are the highlight of all this.
Oh, thank you. Like I said, it's really fun. They do get excited about it. I'm hopeful that will continue. It's been something the first couple of years I was like, yeah, it's still new. They're excited. It's once a week. Thankfully, that's lasted a little while. I have my set curriculum and things that I want to teach them. I also sometimes just get to be in there and hang out with them and talk to them, and that discussion is actually what is sometimes the most impactful part of it. They again get to do a lot of self-reflection during that time. I really am strategic about what kind of questions I'm asking and getting to know them so that they they can feel known, which is really cool. It's one of my favorite parts of the week too. So Erika is writing down some of these answers as we go through these. They are scrolling in. I believe if I hit present, they will all pop up here.
Oh, nice.
I think so, but Brad walked me through this, and then now they're just going to come in really slowly. So we might let them come in. If you feel comfortable, I would love for you to turn to somebody at your table and just share a little bit about Why do you think this might be something that your students are already really good at? Maybe there's something intentional that you have done in your life. Maybe it's just a skill that they already have. Maybe you want to reinforce it in a certain way. But maybe how you see this or where you think this strength comes from in your students. If you want to kind of discuss real quick.
Not anymore.
Okay, great. Yes. What is the rest of it? Just because I know what you're looking for. That's okay. Okay. Thank you. Erika's gonna go shut some doors. We are going to do like a kind of similar type thing. I'm gonna actually just leave this one up and have you text into the same thing so we don't have to re-sign in. But I'd like you to think about that same list of options, and I can go back to that list if you need it, if you don't have it in front of you too. But I want you to kind of same process, send in, what do you think on that, out of that list, out of those themes that we kind of talk about in our SEL programming, where do you see like the biggest area of need for growth in your student? Which one do you think that you would hope that we could focus on a bit more or work on a bit more with your students? And we'll just send it again right into this. I know that's not the question at the top. I had a separate one, but then we don't have to re-log in or re-send a code or whatever.
What does that sound?
There was a lead. My shutting the door.
Nope. Can't think of it. Okay, and then since some of you, as you were sending them in, question follow-up that I'm going to ask you to kind of discuss with your table and or a different table if you want to get up and move a little bit. How do you see this showing up in your kiddos' lives? What are some things you've tried so far to help with this? Where do you need help with this? Like, what questions do you have? And I might jot some of those down. Erika's writing down like, okay, what do we see the need for to focus on? But we might jot down a few of the questions that you have too, because if we can start to figure out ways to help you all with that, that would be great too. So again, go ahead and share a little bit, talk about how you see this showing up, what you've tried before, what has helped maybe, and or feel free to get insight of like, oh, I tried this with my kiddo and it's really helped. Maybe it can help with yours. We'll take about 2 minutes to discuss that.
Katrina, the pool is full.
Oh, poll is full. Oh no.
We'll see if the maximum number of responses.
Brett didn't tell me about that one. Do you have these written down? I do. Let's pause and I can reopen the other poll then.
We can maybe try deleting some of our responses.
Oh, I wonder about that. I'm going to clear the responses. Does that sound okay? And then see if we can send a few more.
I'm able to delete our own responses as well.
Oh, perfect. Much more similar. Okay. Good to know.
That's good for our.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah. Type it up.
Yeah, we said apologizing is easier again when you start different
Stress is a lot. Yeah.
One of them anyway.
Chloe, I put, dealing with stress.
You did. You did.
My son
All right, we'll give it about 15, 20 more seconds.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna go back and look. I like it.
Yeah, thanks.
now we know it can get full.
Yeah, good to know. I wonder if that's something I could have edited. Because we've done, well, we've done for faculty, have done that. All right, if we could wrap up in the next few seconds, that would be great. As I look at these, I want to clarify a few things with you all. I know the discussion is such a fun part of it too. So we have these overall themes. I do want to clarify a little bit. Some of these show up K through 5. We talk about kindness with kindergartners and we talk about kindness with 5th graders, right? Some of them come up in different ways. So the way that we talk about internet safety in 3rd grade is a little bit different than the way we talk about internet safety in 5th grade. Some of the things we don't introduce until it's a little bit more developmentally appropriate. Learning to apologize is something that we do with kindergartners, 1st graders, 2nd graders quite a bit. And then a few weeks ago, I was like, ooh, this would feel really helpful in the 4th grade classroom. Let's adapt what I do with the kindergartners and make it fit for the 4th graders. So it kind of shows up in different ways, which is really nice. As you all were kind of entering your answers for this, Erika was writing them down, and it was interesting. I don't know if you want to share. There was like pretty repeated and consistent answers of like what you all see.
In the strength, there was a lot more variety in the strengths category, the strengths that we think each of our kids have. But then in the growth category, they kind of consolidated into similar themes. Stress, worry, anxiety were probably the top ones. And then conflict resolution type thing. But most of it was that stress, anxiety, worry, adapting to change. And I told Megan, I said, well, that sounds like my kids too. From a young age, even now, even into middle school. We deal with it a lot more now that they're older, but my oldest especially, just that anxiety and that worry is something we have had to really work through at home. And I get a lot of tools from Megan as a parent, but also learning how to talk to her about those feelings and what she can do to help regulate herself when she's feeling that way.
So hopefully we're going to kind of transition into some of the tools that we use here at school. Hopefully you might find one that feels helpful for you to address some of these things. Most of them that we're going to teach today do have to do with kind of like that stress, anxiety, managing worry, emotional regulation. So we're going to teach you a few of them, but this is really helpful for us to have that feedback. So thank you for participating in that poll. Yes, Amy.
Do you feel like the last 2 years of COVID have affected that, or has it always been this age who feels this way?
Yeah, so like Erika shared, like she was like, oh, this is how my kid, like this is what I was worried about when they were lower school students. But yes, we saw a huge increase, and like data shows a huge increase in anxiety, depression, like that isolation. Even we talked about as we were kind of reintegrating students back into the classroom, like what are the kindergartners and first graders going to look like this year? Because they had a gap in those like social skill development time, right? I think they've done so incredibly well, and I actually have been really impressed with how they've adapted to the classroom. But yes, there's definitely been an increase, and that's kind of nationwide, worldwide, I would imagine. I know the statistics for the United States, we've seen a big increase, and really like the whole mental health world is pretty busy right now, so huge increase.
And it's just skills that kids learn as they're interacting with other kids, right? They go to preschool when they're 3, they learn how to share, they learn how to communicate what they need. And these kids didn't get to do that. They didn't get to do that when they were 3 or 4. And if they did, it was on a much different scale than previous groups of kids. So that's the type of stuff that we're seeing in the classroom in terms of, oh, well, they've just never experienced this. So there's a lot more direct teaching in how to get along with others, how to work with others, that we maybe haven't had to do much in the past, but.
Well, and I just think of some of like the physical changes of how we've had to adapt the classroom. Like typically in kindergarten, they sit at tables like you all are right now. And last year they were at individual desks because we needed to do that for social distancing. We've talked a lot in the last 2 years about like how to recognize what somebody is feeling or experiencing when you can't see their face, when that's a big part of like how you kind of read what somebody's feeling. And we've tried to adapt our curriculum to fit that, but yes, there's been a huge increase, and it's something that we're very aware of. I think most families that we've worked with are pretty aware of, and it's a big conversation in the mental health field for sure.
Well, and I think that's another reason why we wanted to do this presentation, because it's not just what we do in the classroom, and it's not just what you do at home, but when the work that parents are doing at home supports what we do in the classroom and vice versa, it's just so much better for the kids because they're hearing the same language, they're hearing the same narrative in both places. And the more they hear that, the easier it is for them to adapt and to work with what they need.
Thank you, great question. Okay, so we are going to teach you a little tool that we do in the classrooms. This is something I introduced this year. So we do it literally every single week with our lower school students. This is how we start our SEL sessions. It sounds really simple, but it's really fun and it's really beneficial. So triangle breathing is what it is. It's realistically just some deep breathing. But we've made it, I think, kind of fun. The kids seem really excited about it still, like 8 months into this. Some of the benefits of this, we look at reducing stress symptoms, positive effect on emotional and overall well-being. It can help with increasing mental clarity. Literally just like getting some oxygen to the brain can help them with clarity and making decisions. We see it being a really great proactive tool as well. We're doing it in the classroom, like I said, at the beginning of SEL sessions, but I've noticed that students have started using it in other areas too. So like before cross-country races, they were like, can we do triangle breathing? The 5th graders had their music tryouts 2 weeks ago or so, and thankfully I was there that morning and we were like, okay, let's do some triangle breathing. And then they got to there and they were like, can you come to tryouts and can we do triangle breathing? And so they're like, they're not only learning it, but they're like feeling the benefits of it already. And I think that that's a wonderful tool. When we introduced it in the 3rd grade classroom, Denny was like, they literally taught my college student this during freshman orientation this year. Like it is a skill that can be used kind of throughout their life. So as simple as it is, it also is really effective and has a lot of beneficial things that come with it. So we did a few examples, how I kind of introduced this to the students. Each week, a student gets to go up to the whiteboard in the classroom and draw any kind of triangle they want to and turn it into something fun. Gives them a little bit of that like creative curiosity in it, and they come up with some really fun stuff. It's neat. So Erika asked the kindergartners to put together a few examples. I just found this as I was putting books out. It was one that a 1st grader did. So they just get to go up and create, like I said, any kind of triangle that they want. Lots of the times they're like cats and dogs. Cats are a big one.
Sharks.
They are funny.
Made this one. Lily.
Oh,
I didn't ask her about the person next to her. That might be some shark or something.
We get lots of like mountains and food-related things, party hats, Christmas trees, all sorts of things. Yeah. They're really fun and they look forward to it. They always plan like who's going to be next week. Anyway, we've got them the triangle up there. We always draw these arrows around the triangle and we'll say things like, okay, so as we go up the mountain, we're going to do our 3 seconds of inhale. As we ski down the mountain, we're going to hold our breath. And as we go across the bottom to get over, we're going to exhale. And the goal is we do 3 seconds inhale, 3 seconds of holding our breath, 3 seconds of exhaling, and we do that 3 times. So we're going to do it this morning, and I'm going to have you all practice it as well. Just like I did the kids, just make sure your masks are on correctly right here because we will be doing a big exhale. And I know it sounds kind of cheesy, but I want to actually hear the exhale. That's like the big important part of like filling up your lungs completely, trying to breathe consistently for the whole 3 seconds of an inhale, holding that breath, and then out. I'll do it the way that I do it with the kids, where I will inhale and count to 3, pause and count to 3, and exhale and count to 3. And we'll do it 3 times. So are we ready? Any questions?
Sitting or standing?
You can choose. You can lay on the floor if you want to. And some kids do. Yeah. And you can close your eyes if you'd like to. We have some kids that'll like literally sit in little meditation. It's very adorable. But they really get into it, which is the important part. So we will start and get your breath out in 3, 2, 1. In. Hold. Out. Again, in. Hold. Out. In. Hold. So we start every SEL with that. It's a great way to just kind of get them grounded. We're going to talk a little bit later about grounding exercises and how important our senses and our breathing and kind of just being aware of what we're feeling in our body and what we're experiencing and then what to do with those things. Super simple thing. It can be a really effective tool that can kind of be used whenever and wherever, which is why we wanted to talk about it today. Your kiddos know this. They know this language. They know what triangle breathing is. They use it at school. Maybe some of them are using it at home. I hope so. But feel free to take this and use it if it feels effective for you. With any of these tools, figure out what works for you and your kiddos and use that, and don't use what doesn't work. And that is okay. This is not something we're saying like you have to, just like Erika was saying earlier. It's just helpful when we are collaborating with what's going on at home and what's going on at school. We see really like more beneficial things moving forward.
Well, and with the triangle breathing, I've had kids that were having problems on the playground, and then before they want to talk about the problem, they wanted to do their triangle breathing first. So they are trying to use it and make it work in their life. Marissa?
I was just gonna say, with 3 kids in lower school, I've seen them help each other with this too. Louis drew Clara a triangle, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks ago, when she was stressed out about something. He said, I made you a triangle, you know what to do.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
And before I have to go in a second, but before I do, I want to compliment a little bit about our lower school staff. To Amy's question a little bit, I'm going to take this off for a moment. The lower school staff is very, very flexible and attentive to what they see happening on a day-to-day basis. So as Erika was saying, I realized they didn't know this, but that's a teacher who understands that this is a teachable moment, not a frustration moment. Like, oh my gosh, these kids don't know that, how horrible. Our teachers use that as a tool to say, hey, I can now be proactive and say, this is a time that we can make some growth with these kids, and I had no idea, but that's what we do. Back when I was learning to be a teacher in 1988, I don't mind saying that, I love it. Madeline Hunter was the big guru of teacher prep and teacher training, and her mantra was monitor and adjust, monitor and adjust, monitor and adjust. So our teachers, specialists, and classroom teachers are always monitoring what's going on, adjusting to the needs of the moment. And my hat's off to Meghan and all of our teachers in lower school for doing that on a daily basis with your kids. It makes a big difference. So really, honestly, yeah, that's super good.
Erika's going to talk a little bit about emotional regulation, but I will say, just to kind of connect what Rick just shared with this, one of the best ways that we can teach emotional regulation is to model it. So we do a lot of practice as a lower school faculty of like, how do we respond to this? How do we react to this? What is the best way to talk about this? And how do we model just appropriate emotional responses to things that are hard in our life? One of the big things that I'm really always talking about with parents is like, it is okay for your child to feel hard things, for them to experience sadness and anxiety and worry. Those are actually really normal things for them to experience. And realistically, you kind of want them to experience them now when you're there as a safe person to help them with them, figure out what to do with those feelings. Because if they're just shielded from it their whole entire lives, then they enter into adulthood and they're like, I don't know what to do with anything that I'm feeling right now. So I know it is, well, I don't know. I imagine it is hard to watch your kids feel really sad or really worried or really stressed. But it's also, again, just like a teachable moment of, okay, what do we do when we feel this way? How do we manage this? Which kind of goes into the emotional regulation, so I'll let you talk.
Well, when Megan and I were putting the presentation together, we're like, well, we don't have time to talk about everything. We only have an hour, but of all the things that we looked at on that list of skills, emotional regulation just kept coming up. As a teacher, this is what I spend a lot of my time doing, is helping kids work through their emotions. And as a parent, this is the one that is often hardest for me as a parent, because I don't always know what to do when my kids are highly emotional about an event. So the first, if you look over here, like working towards regulation, the first thing, and I think probably one of the most important, is just acknowledging that that emotion is what they're feeling. You know, oh, you're angry, you're frustrated, and really teaching the kids to come up with that language themselves. You know, rather than saying, you seem angry, I'll ask questions like, how are you feeling right now? And get them to voice their emotion versus me trying to project what the emotion is. I probably know the emotion, especially if it's my own kid, but really getting them to take ownership of that emotion, because then when they take ownership of it, then you can move into, oh, that's number two, identifying the emotion. I kind of put those together.
Well, they go together, that validating. And one of the terms that I've felt is really helpful, open-ended questions we'll talk about a little bit later too as an important thing, but a statement of just like, oh, I wonder how you're feeling, kind of allows for them to then be able to identify the emotion.
But then accepting the emotion, and I think the fourth one, the managing the emotion, is that's where kids struggle. I see adults struggling. I can struggle with that. You know, it's okay to feel that way. It's okay to feel the anger and the frustration and the hurt or the sadness. But now that I'm feeling it, now what can I do? And with kids, you see so much of just that impulsive behavior of acting out, crying, you know, on the playground, we see the hitting and so really teaching them it's okay to feel this way, but when you feel this way, we need to have positive ways of managing that emotion. The other thing with emotional regulation is an appropriate response to an event, right? So sometimes maybe Megan accidentally bumps me when we're lining up to come into the classroom. So an appropriate response might be, oh, Megan, you know, please don't bump me, or I scoot away, you know, but the inappropriate response would be to like flat out just push Megan to the ground. And that's what we see kids doing a lot of times, is they are so upset, they just overreact to a simple situation. So really walking through kids at school, we kind of walk through with them. If someone were to do this to you, what would be a better response? And giving them multiple solutions. Sometimes I have to give the solutions to the kids because they aren't able to generate them. If they can generate them, that's really helpful. But if they can't, I'll say, well, you could walk away. You could just scoot over so you're not so close to them. You could ignore it. But really giving them the choices of, when I feel this way, what can I do with those emotions?
Yeah, because it's hard for them to make decisions when their brain is like kind of flooded with that emotional response. So sometimes all we really ask them to do is like, hey, can we pause, take a second, take a breather, do some triangle breathing, and then think about what to do with this emotion. And then sometimes it is just kind of this accepting our emotions and just like sitting in it, saying, yeah, it's okay, I'm gonna feel sad about this for a little bit, and it makes sense that I'm feeling sad about this. Kind of, I mean, this is a good, I don't know what I want to use. To go through these step by step is great. They also kind of overlap and intertwine quite a bit too, and you can kind of bounce back and forth between them as well.
So this is a emotional regulation grounding exercise with the it says write things down, but with the really little kids, we just more talk through it. It's to help calm them and just be present in what's happening right now. To talk about 5 things you see, 4 things you feel, 3 things you hear, 2 things you smell, 1 thing you taste or love about yourself, but really trying to get them to be aware of what's around them, focus on other things other than that heightened emotion, to come back, to bring their emotions back down. When they're here on the emotional scale, you can't really talk to them. You can't share with them what they should be doing. You have to get them to calm back down before you can have a discussion. So this is a great way to help them take a deep breath, calm back down. Now let's talk about the issue.
And this is something, this grounding exercise is something we teach lower, middle, and upper school. It's something that's really effective. We see with our middle and upper school students who experience like anxiety and or panic. What we know about the brain is that there's just so much going on at once. We call it flooding. And when we can, again, like slow that down using our senses, that's the best way to get back to a place where they can make decisions, talk about what they're feeling, ask for what they need, figure out what they need. So it just kind of calms them down. It is a thing also that you can practice at any time, and that's what I tell like our students that have pretty intense panic attacks. I'm like, do this 3, 4, 5 times a day so that your brain is used to it, so that when you start feeling that panic arise, you know what to do, right? Then you don't get overwhelmed in the feeling so much that you can't even get back to that place where we pause. So just a great tool to have really for any age, but we can start it really early. This also kind of, all the senses stuff kind of falls under that mindfulness umbrella that we talk about a lot throughout the lower school programming. We get to do fun like mindfulness scavenger walks when we go outside and have them like go find 5 fuzzy things. Again, we're really looking at senses there. Go find 3 green things. Find 2 things that smell good, and you can do a whole like scavenger hunt. We do that about once a year with each class in the lower school, usually when it gets a little warmer outside. And it's just a fun way. They get to be outside, which is great for them too. But use those senses. You can also obviously do this indoors. Pretty effective tool. We've seen it work really, really well for a lot of our students. I'm going to go through this one quickly just because I'm looking at the time. This is an important one. It was another thing as Eric and I were talking about, like what are some good takeaways for our parents to have when they leave. I also talk about this a little bit in our 6th grade back to school or parent presentation that I do with Joelle. It's just really good stuff, and basically I want to just like emphasize the importance of language and how why we talk about things matters, and then like give you all some tools of how to talk about them. So we talked a little bit about using open-ended questions. We see a big difference. Let's say your kiddo's been, let's say Erika and Megan have been having troubles in the classroom pretty consistently. Erika gets in the car after a long day of school. If your first question to Erika is, so what happened with Megan today? It's going to immediately put her in that mind frame and mindset of like, oh, let me think about how to answer my mom's question. What did happen with me and Megan today? Like, oh my gosh, yes, this happened on the playground and it was terrible. And it just kind of gets them in that spiral, right? You can, a simple like, hey, how was your day? Totally fine. But also like, hey, what's one good thing that happened today? Did you have a good day? That's a yes or no, and it's a trickier, like that only gives them the one option of either like, yes, I did, or no, I didn't. And typically, especially our lower school kiddos, their days are all over the place. They might have some hard moments, absolutely. Typically, I would say we have pretty good days here. But being able to use questions that help elicit like a more formed response, give them more thought into what they're sharing with you, rather than just like, oh, it was a terrible day, and yep, I fought with Megan. Like, not great. So using those open-ended questions, and with that, avoiding interviewing for pain. That's a term I learned from Jamie Tender. He talked about like, if we are only focusing on the things that we know our kiddos are struggling with, that is basically communicating to them, this is what's important and this is what I want to talk about. Now, totally a balance of, you do want to validate what your kid is experiencing. You do want to talk to them about the hard parts. You want to say like, hey, yeah, it's okay to talk about these hard parts, but also find a balance of like, how can we talk about the hard parts in a way that it's like emotionally healthy for them, gives them a way to process, gives them a way to feel connected to you and get some help in it, but also talk about the good things too. One thing we talk about is the difference of basically when we give feedback, when we are giving positive feedback, talking about who they are as a person. This helps them to develop that sense of self-awareness, first of all, but also some of that like kind of self-esteem, confidence type things. So when we're saying like, hey, you are really kind. Like, that is about who they are as a person, rather than like, oh, I saw you do a kind thing. That's great, and we can totally acknowledge a positive behavior, but when we're getting positive feedback, try to focus on who they are rather than what they're doing, and then vice versa. When we're getting kind of some of that negative thing, like, oh, I didn't love that choice you made, that helps them not internalize, not like kind of build up those shame or guilt or those types of feelings. So this is hard. Don't expect you to do it all the time, but it can be a good thing to keep in mind when you're talking to your kids, so that they're not internalizing all of that, like, oh, I'm a terrible person. We hear that sometimes. Like, we hear kids talking about themselves and they're like, oh, nobody wants me here. Everybody hates me. And it's like, no. You had a hard moment. Like, that's okay. You do have friends. You do connect with folks. These are the things I really love about who you are at your core, right? And like, yeah, sometimes we make poor choices, and that happens. It is what we do after that and how we respond to that poor choice, what we do next, that really matters most. So we talk a lot about these types of things throughout the year in our programming. And then this is just one thing that I was like, I just got to share this once we're up here talking. Again, I do this with the 6th grade parents as well. It has just been a really, really effective tool. It's something I learned in grad school, of how, when you're talking with kids, how to kind of meet them where they're at, and how to like kind of not take over every single problem and make it your own, and or try to fix everything for them, because realistically, like, we want to help them develop those problem solving skills. So basically, when they're talking to you, you can follow it up with these 3 questions or a combination of 1 or 2. Do you need help with this problem? Do I need to actively do something to help you out with this? And definitely sometimes, like, that is our role as supporters, parents, educators. Do you want advice? Do you want me to share with you what I think could be helpful, and then you get to do the action step of that, and or come up with an action step that feels good for you? Or do you just need me to listen? This one I feel like is so important to talk about, because sometimes kids don't need us to fix their problems for them, and sometimes they do just want to talk about it, and they're not even actually looking for like, here's what you need to do. They just want to say like, yeah, my experience matters, and this happened, and it sucked, and I feel sad about it, and that's okay, right? It's okay for us to feel sad, and then we can kind of move on. And I think I find a lot of time, kids just want to feel heard. They just want to feel like somebody cares about what they're experiencing, and they want to feel a little less alone in it. It can be really hard to just listen and not take action, and obviously, you know your kids, even if they say like, oh no, I just want you to listen, sometimes we still do need to take action, right? Sometimes they are bigger problems that we need to say like, no, I need to get another adult involved in this, or I need to let the teacher know that this is kind of consistently happening. So obviously, like, use your judgment with these, but we found that this is like a really effective way to meet your kiddo where they are, help them out, help them feel heard, take action when we need.
Well, and as kids get older, they want more of this.
Yeah.
They, so as a parent, when they're little, you help them through almost every problem, right? They're needing our help to navigate this stuff. But as they get older, your role kind of changes to being a listener and an advocate for your child, but really letting them navigate how do I solve this problem? What do I need to do? And let them take on that role. And for me as a parent, that it's a challenging transition to just be the one that they come and listen to, but then they have to do the action of solving the problem versus me doing the action.
But again, it's what you want.
It is what I want, which is very hard.
Right. I can't imagine. But it's something
because you're right.
Like,
and because you're, as an adult, we have our own experiences. Like we've been through middle school, we've been through high school. We take our experience into those conversations, but they have to have their own experiences. So.
It's hard. I can't imagine how hard it is. And then this I just threw on here. It kind of goes with those zones of regulation that Erika was talking about. Again, it's just kind of a language tool. I'm not going to get into super big detail about it. You can totally Google zones of regulation and stuff will come up like this. And or like feel free to connect afterwards and we can talk more about it. It's just giving them the language of like, hey, what color are you feeling today? And they can say like, oh, I'm feeling really green. Some of our teachers do this every single morning. They have a little check-in. Jess has been really great. I've learned a lot of cool tools from her as well in social emotional learning. And she has them go in every day and put their name under what category they're feeling today. It gives her a good idea of like where their student's starting out that day. They can always go and move it, but they don't always have to say like, oh, I am feeling like I don't have any control of my life right now. I'm feeling super stressed, anxious. They don't have to exactly identify all of that, because sometimes that can be hard because it's kind of vulnerable to share our feelings. They can just say, yep, I'm in the yellow zone today. And again, helps her have an understanding of where they're at and figure out how she can kind of adapt to fit those needs for the day. Good for this one?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so bibliotherapy. This is one of my favorite tools to use. It is something I'm doing in the classrooms with them, probably 1 to 2 times, maybe 3 times a month even. We do some activities and some hands-on type learning as well. I will say the bibliotherapy, I do more so K through 3, and then 4 and 5, we walk a little bit away from the books, and we're doing a little bit more like discussion-based because that's where they're at, that's what works best for them. But we throw in some books here and there anyway. Be Where Your Feet Are is one that I use K through 5. We start the year with it. It is a great lesson on mindfulness, but also just like being present, which helps with so many different things. When we are looking at bibliotherapy, basically the idea is like have a story and figure out what the lesson or the goal of the story is, and then ask them questions throughout to help basically reinforce that idea, what you're hoping that they get away from that. It can help them kind of do all the things we've been talking about so far this morning. Identify and validate feelings of a character, kind of detach from themselves and say like, oh, this makes sense for this character, and also I've probably felt this way at some point in my life too. It helps them recognize and realize that other people experience the same things that they might, and also then leads into that like, okay, how do I solve this problem? What are some things that I can do to address this problem? How can I ask for help in this problem? Fosters a sense of like thoughtfulness and self-awareness, gets them reflecting on what they might do in certain situations or how they might empathize with different people. And obviously it like stimulates some good discussion. So we're gonna do a little role playing really quickly. I'm gonna show you, not the whole book, but I'm gonna show you like what this kind of looks like. And then we're gonna ask you to practice it at your table with the books. You can feel free to use whichever books you want. Eric and I were talking about this a little bit beforehand. The books that I use in my SEL programming are all like kind of SEL books, and it's very easy to do this when you have a book that like has a specific SEL tool or skill that you're hoping to teach them. It can also though be done, and I know Eric, you want to talk a little bit about this. You have more experience with this.
Well, because you have books like in kindergarten this week, they're reading Kindness is My Superpower, Responsibility is My Superpower, Teamwork is My Superpower. So those books are written very clearly to talk about an SEL skill. So there are books written like that for the specific purpose of teaching an SEL skill, but then you also have books like just picture books, like Bear Wants More, or Chrysanthemum's another great one, and they're not written necessarily for the sake of an SEL skill. They're written for the kids to enjoy a story. But in almost every picture book I read, especially any fiction book, I can find an SEL skill that I want kids to practice and work on. I mean, if there's a character, they have a problem, they solve the problem, you know, in that plot of a story, there's almost always some sort of SEL skill that I can pull out of. And the more I do it with the kids, the more my kindergartners find those skills. Oh, they weren't very kind to their friends. Oh, they were. What do you think is going to happen? Or, oh, they did not tell the truth. They do not have the core values of honesty. And so just that continual conversation in language outside of their experience, right? They're talking about someone else. They're talking about a character. It's much easier to talk about a character in a book lying than it is to talk about yourself telling your parents a lie.
And you can kind of use some of the tools in the language that we've used in this presentation within bibliotherapy. So like using those open-ended questions, figuring out how to help them identify emotions or validate the emotions. Talk about what could this person do when they're feeling this way. So I mean, we read books a lot with the lower school students. I also run into where I like get through half a book and I'm like, well, our 30 minutes is done because there was so much discussion during that book that I'm like, this is the more important stuff. Like, yes, this story is great. Yes, I love this book. But the takeaways I want is like, oh, how do I think about coping with something? What could I do to help solve this problem? So we're going to do a little, like I said, role play of like what this kind of looks like. It is fun. It can be really fun. And again, it just kind of promotes that healthy discussion and gets them thinking outside of themselves a little bit, which is also just like a really good skill to develop. So I'll read a couple pages of this, show you kind of how I ask these questions. Erica's going to pretend to be a student. Thank you. And then we will have you all practice it as well. So we're going to read Be Where Your Feet Are today. Okay. These are my feet, and this is me. Sometimes I'm not where I'm supposed to be. Okay, kindergartners, what do you notice about our character on this page? Do you see anything? What kinds of things do you observe?
His legs are all curly cute.
Oh, why do we think his legs might be curly cute? Do we know? I wonder. Let's see what happens next and see if they tell us, okay? My brain gets crowded, there's so much going on. I do 3 things at once and get 2 of them wrong. Be where your feet are, I hear people say. Do one thing at a time. It's a much better way. Every day my feet get ready for school, but the rest of me has other things to do. What do I think our character's feeling today? We hear his brain's really crowded, right? There's so much going on. What might he be feeling?
Well, the other day when I was getting ready for school, my mom asked me to brush my teeth and put my shoes on and get my backpack, and I forgot to get my backpack.
Oh, I bet that was a hard morning.
Yeah, it wasn't very fun.
Yeah, what'd you do when you got to school if you didn't have your backpack?
Went and talked to Melanie.
Was she helpful?
She had to call my mom. My mom wasn't very happy.
That's good for you.
Not very good.
Yeah, I wonder if that's kind of how our characters feel, like not very good.
Yeah.
Sounds like maybe it was
Maybe they
similar
just
morning.
forgot though, because sometimes mornings are really busy.
Mornings are really busy. I have a hard time with mornings.
Me too.
Yeah. Something
So
that
does my mom.
Oh, does she? Something that helps
That's what
your
they
mom.
really would
Yes,
say.
they really do. They totally do. And I like to respond like, oh, your mom and I probably both struggle with mornings. Coffee is something that helps me in the morning. What's something that helps you in the morning to get ready?
Not my mom's coffee. It helps if my backpack's already by the door.
Oh,
That
that is.
pack it up the night before.
I love that. I like to plan ahead too sometimes. Thank you for sharing. All right, let's see what happens next in this. Is your homework in your backpack? Did you brush your teeth? Don't forget your permission slip for the field trip next week. Remember, you have a game tonight, so hurry home right after school. Good luck on your trombone tryout and try hard to follow the rules. What are we noticing? Anything different on this page? He's still got his squiggly feet, right?
Yeah,
That might be because he's struggling to be where his feet are. They're all the way downstairs in the kitchen.
he's still in his bed.
Yeah, and he's playing a game, it looks like, yeah?
Yeah.
It kind of feels hard, right?
Getting ready.
Yeah. I wonder what school's gonna feel like. What do you think he might feel going into school today?
He might be kind of overwhelmed.
Yeah. Have you ever felt overwhelmed before?
Yeah, when my mom tells me to do the 3 things. I'm
Mom just listed like 8 things you need to remember for today. So many things. I would have such a hard time with that. All right, let's see how he deals with it. My feet walked me to school, and on the way, I practiced my trombone solo in my head. When I got there, my teacher said, "Hand in your permission slips," I heard my teacher say. "Please place your homework in the basket and put your other stuff away." I reached into my backpack, but it was empty. I know my homework's in here, and my permission slip is too. I thought I put them in last night. Now what am I supposed to do? All right, folks, what do we think he could do? He doesn't have his permission slip. What's the next step for him?
Maybe to just stand there and cry.
Ooh, what would happen if he did that? How do you think his teacher would feel?
We should probably come help him because he was crying.
True. Is there something he could try other than standing and crying?
Go tell his teacher he doesn't have it. That's so hard though.
Why is that hard?
I feel like you're in trouble.
Yeah. Sometimes it is hard to talk to our teachers. We feel like we're gonna get in trouble. I wonder if we could just be honest with her. What would that look like?
No, well, that's what dragons do.
Yeah, dragons do. That's one of our core values, isn't it?
It's so
Yeah.
hard.
How could we practice that? What would that sound like if you went to your teacher?
Miss Megan, I looked in my backpack and I really thought I put it there, but I don't have my permission.
I bet that feels really hard, doesn't it? I wonder, since.
And actually, my mom didn't put it there.
Oh, she didn't. Tell me, what did you talk about with your mom? Did you know?
My mom just didn't put it in my backpack.
Did you think she was going to?
Yeah, my mom always does.
Yeah, it's hard for us to learn that responsibility, isn't it? Yeah, but it is something we can practice.
But maybe I can bring it tomorrow.
Well, that's what I was just thinking. Our field trip isn't until next week, and I think, especially since you just came to me and you were honest and you were really forward about what's going on, I can just probably call your mom and either get it from her or you can bring it tomorrow. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, maybe I should have a Post-it.
What a good idea. Maybe we can go put it by your cubby so that you know at the end of the day. Does that feel okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and here, I want you to know, I'm not upset with you. It's okay. We forget things sometimes. Thanks for telling me about it. All right, let's see what happens next. Okay, so do we get this idea that like this kind of conversation is totally okay in books? I was meeting with a parent a few weeks ago, and she was like, I just feel like my kid just like wants to know the end of what's going to happen and just rushes through it. He's like, what happens next? And I'm like, well, let's see. And I'm like, okay, wait, pause. Great, yes, let's like work on pausing and not rushing through books, but also like let's use this as an opportunity to talk about like how can we grow from this. So he's wondering what happens next. Pause, and instead of like flipping through the pages, pause and say, let's come up with like what might happen next. What might this look like? And just like use again those open-ended questions, ways to validate feelings, way to process through things. And realistically, this is also a way to just connect with your kiddos too and have discussion in a way that feels comfortable for them, because again, it's not actually about themselves, it's about this character in a book. Okay, we are at 9:30 if anybody does need to leave. We are going to take, if you all are good with staying, please feel free, and thank you for joining regardless of when you need to leave. So great to have everyone. But find a book on your table and or come grab one from another table and just kind of practice this. It might feel weird and funky at first, and it might feel really easy. Maybe you're already doing this, but just kind of practice. We're going to kind of walk around the room and just kind of give suggestions here. Yeah. Any questions before we get started with this little activity? Okay, cool. What is it? Alright, I think we're gonna wrap up for now with this activity. Thank you all for trying that out with us. I want to share something. Let's go away. Yeah, there we go. I want to share, I was just kind of having a conversation with Joel in the back, and I want to share actually some takeaways from it because it was helpful for me, and I think it's an important piece of this too. And I kind of talked about it earlier a little bit, but with all of these tools, yes, we want to provide them to you. Yes, we do them in school, and we hope that they help and meet the goals of helping them develop those social emotional skills. I also want to share that we can do all of this stuff and still have hard times working with our kiddos, and we can still see our kiddos struggle, and these things don't always help every single time. Joel, I don't know if you want to share, if you feel comfortable sharing what you kind of just said to me. It just was good for me to keep in mind too.
I was telling Megan about an interaction I had with my super fun 17-year-old son this morning. And the shortest version of it is I had made him some of these breakfast bars because he is so hungry in the morning. We have no food to eat whatsoever. And he took one bite and said, "This is gross," and threw it away. And then I said, "Well, you can grab something else because you only have so much money to spend at school." And he said, "So you're not even going to feed me?" I feel like that's not what just happened. But what I was talking to Megan is being a parent, the older they get, little kids, it's a lot easier because you recognize that they're impulsive and they don't always know what they're saying. And the older they get, the more you're like, "You really just said that to me." And so what I try to remember is what my goal is. I'm trying to get him to understand the way that he's talking to me, or the lack of appreciation, or just the logic of whatever he just said. Trying to remember what the goal is and separate my own frustration and feelings. So I only say that as your kids get older, it is okay to be upset and hurt and whatever about what they say, because they still are going to say impulsive and rude and not very nice things. And it's okay to pause and wait. And then all the stuff in the little stories, if there was a picture book, the 16-year-old kid throwing away his breakfast he made for him. You think, okay, how can I react to this? So I waited a second. I'm like, well, I just really want you to think about what you said to me. I am feeding you. It might not be the most delicious thing, but it did taste gross. It was just a little bit drunk. So, and there is other choices you can make. And, you're going to have to decide, do you want to spend some of your own money to buy extra breakfast or whatever? So anyway, that's what we were talking about. And I just think it's applicable because I go back to this, when we look at emotional regulation, again, the number one way to teach that is to model it. And I can't imagine how hard that is in a day when you do have stuff to get done. You are feeling all the things that you're feeling as a human too. But thinking about how we respond to our children and how we show them what to do when we're feeling, how to react in that kind of situation, that is one of the key things in this, and what we do as educators here too, of okay, we need to model what we're teaching them as best as we can, and we need to talk about when we don't do it great, let's talk about it afterwards and say hey, I'm sorry, I just I don't think this has ever happened, it's just the example that I was kind of oh, I'm sorry, I just snapped at Erika today, I'm feeling really grumpy and I took it out on you and I'm really sorry and I should not have done that. Is there anything I can do to help you feel better about it, right?
But as a parent, I do that.
You do what?
Snap at my kids.
Totally.
So like as a teacher, I don't think I've ever apologized to a student for doing that, but I do apologize to my own children when I'm the one being impatient and I'm the one who I feel overwhelmed and I feel frustrated. I will come back to my kids and say, I am so sorry I reacted this way. And I don't make an excuse for my behavior. I apologize. I ask them to forgive me because that's what I want them to do. So trying to model that behavior.
Right.
But I do have to go in the other room usually and calm down. I need to do my triangle breathing and then come back and apologize to my children.
It can be a really effective thing to model. And one thing that we really focus on in the lower school is finding that balance between like the way that we interact with each other and the impact that we have on each other can be a really important thing. Like we can have an impact on each other and it can be positive and negative, but it's also a really important thing to remind your kiddos, like you're not responsible for other people's emotions, right? Like you have an impact on it and you're responsible for your choices, absolutely. But like if Erika's really mad at you, like maybe Erika just needs to sit in that for a little bit and figure that out on her own. Here are some things you can try and here are some things you can do, and we can talk about it as much as you want. But you can't make Erika happy, and that's not your job and that's not your responsibility. And those are like really important conversations that I feel like we're like pretty consistently having with kiddos of like what is in your control and what's not in your control, basically. And what can we do about the things that are in your control and what can we do about the things that are not. So just trying to share little tidbits here and there. Thank you, Joel, for doing that last minute. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but thank you. Totally did. Totally did. We're not going to talk through this. I just wanted to share with you all a few. We will probably put this attachment to this PowerPoint with the video, or you can go in and Google these things. Castle is probably the greatest resource when it comes to SEL, like kind of programming, curriculum, but also just like what it can look like at home, how you can implement some strategies. This one has some parent resources, things that you could use at home. I love the idea of incorporating SEL at home in different ways. Choice boards are a great way to do this. This is just an example of one, but you can have it like a little reward system type thing of like when they get 3 in a row or when they've done a blackout on this and they like get some sort of reward. Ideally that's like a healthy reward too. I try to avoid like screen time as a reward in general, but like things like, oh, you can get a new book or you can get a new family board game that we can play once you finish your kind of fashion SEL chart. Just like having that emphasized at home and talking about how like learning these interpersonal skills, communication skills, figuring out who they are, doing some self-reflection, like all of those things as a priority at home will be really helpful for our programming here at school too. And it's going to help you in the long run. So those are just for you. We're not going to really go through them. And I know we are like way over time. I've got a little bit of time if you do too. I don't know what your timeline looks like, but if we've got questions, if you all want to sit and talk and be with each other for a little bit, that's fine. If you have like individual or specific questions about your kiddo, I think I would ask that like you follow up individually later, but any kind of like general things and or just like, I don't know, any kind of questions and or feedback. Erika is going to be sending out a survey after this just to kind of get some takeaways of like what felt helpful, what was missing from this, what would you like in maybe future kind of presentations, what skills might you use at home and or not. So just to get that, you'll have that coming your way via email, I would imagine.
Yeah, I'll try and get it emailed out this afternoon, and it's only 6 questions,
Yeah.
so it won't take you very long. But just to give us feedback on where we can take this in the future and what you got out of it today.
One of the things that I'm hopeful with the Center for Family Engagement is that we can start providing more and more opportunities like this where we're learning together, learning with and from each other, and then just other like community events. So if you have ideas for that, maybe we saw a lot on here like, okay, my kid needs help dealing with stress. Maybe we do one specifically about that. With the center, I'm also hoping to just have some like connection opportunities. I think hopefully if fingers crossed we're moving towards it, I think we're going to try to do like a lower school movie outdoor night on the ground lawn, just to like come together a little bit and hang out. So we're trying to do a few different things with it, but it's helpful to hear your feedback of like what you would like to see and what would feel helpful for you. So please feel free to share that and or talk with other parents that you know in the classrooms if they have feedback too and weren't able to be here this morning. That would be really great for us. So anything anybody wants to ask, talk about, and no pressure. Don't have to have questions. Cool. Okay. Questions? If you do, please feel free to email either one of us at any time. This is like I love doing this job, but like I am super fortunate to have the lower school faculty who also really prioritize social emotional learning in the classroom. So they are great resources as well. I'm really like daily impressed with our classroom teachers. It's really cool to watch and learn from them as well. So thank you all for being here, making the time,
So
especially with
much
the
for coming.
rescheduling. Thank you. And have a good rest of your day.